What if I told you that the fate of all Europe once depended not on the power of cannons, but on the personal animosity between two old men? There are moments in history when the sea changes color, not from the sunset, but from spilled blood, and 1538 was just such a turning point. Two colossal forces clashed in the waters of the Ionian Sea. The combined fleet of the Christian world and the armada of the Ottoman Empire under the command of the legendary Redbeard. This is not just a story about the maneuvers of ships. It is a drama about pride, betrayal, and fatal mistakes that cost Venice its dominion over the waves. The greatest maritime power of the time was brought to its knees not because of the weakness of its ships, but because of political intrigues within its own camp. We will immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of an era when galleys with thousands of rowers cut through the water and the roar of artillery drowned out the cries of despair. You will see how the personal ambitions of admirals can destroy the efforts of entire nations and redraw the map of the world for centuries to come. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one man's betrayal gave the Sultan the keys to the Mediterranean Sea. Are you ready to learn the truth about the pirate who made kings tremble? Hayreddin Barbarossa was not just a highwayman, as he is often portrayed in adventure novels. He was an outstanding statesman, admiral, and strategist who transformed the chaotic raids of the corsairs into the organized naval machine of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent entrusted him not only with the fleet, but with the very idea of Ottoman domination in the Mediterranean, making him Capitan Pasha. Barbarossa understood the sea as a living organism, knowing every current, every wind, and every bay from Algiers to Istanbul. His opponent was no less legendary, but a completely different man in spirit. The Genoese admiral Andrea Doria. Serving Emperor Charles V, Doria was the embodiment of the old European aristocracy, a calculating and incredibly cautious commander. He commanded the fleet of the Holy League, which on paper surpassed the Ottoman fleet in terms of the number of ships and firepower. However, behind this power lay the fragility of an alliance held together by the thin thread of mutual distrust between Venice, Spain, and the Papal States. For Barbarossa, the upcoming battle was a chance to permanently drive the Christians out of the Eastern Mediterranean and secure the empire's sea lanes. He actively modernized his galleys, making them lighter and more maneuverable than the heavy ships of the Europeans. Ottoman shipbuilders worked day and night to create a fleet capable of operating in all weather conditions. Hayreddin personally inspected each new ship, knowing that the quality of construction could determine the outcome of the battle. The Venetians, who formed the backbone of the Christian fleet, were furious about the Ottoman raids on their trading posts. For the Republic of St. Mark, this war was a matter of survival because losing the sea meant economic death. They were eager for a decisive battle, ready to throw all their forces into destroying the enemy here and now. The Venetian admirals called for an immediate attack, relying on the power of their famous galleasses and heavy cannons. The Spaniards, under whose flag Doria fought, had completely different interests in the region. Emperor Charles V was more concerned with the security of the Western Mediterranean and the fight against French influence than with the protection of the Venetian colonies. Doria received secret instructions not to risk the imperial ships to save their Venetian rivals. This created tremendous tension within the Holy League's command structure, even before the first shot was fired. The assembly of the League's fleet was painfully slow, with ships arriving late at the rendezvous point, wasting precious summertime. Different languages, different signaling systems, and different battle tactics made commanding this armada a real nightmare. The captains argued about seniority, the distribution of supplies, and who would lead the vanguard. Barbarossa, on the other hand, with a unified, disciplined fleet at his disposal, used this time to prepare his position. The Ottoman admiral chose the Gulf of Ambracia, near the fortress of Preveza, as the ideal trap for the superior forces of the enemy. The narrow entrance to the bay, protected by coastal batteries, allowed him to control the situation and prevented the enemy from using their numerical superiority. He literally invited the Europeans to enter the neck of the bottle, where their heavy ships would become easy prey. It was a position of strength taken by a numerically weaker fleet. Europe froze in anticipation of the clash. knowing that the victor would gain control of all maritime trade. Rumors of a giant Christian fleet reached Istanbul, causing alarm at the Sultan's court, but Barbarossa remained unperturbed. He believed in his men and in the mistakes his enemy would inevitably make. The tension grew with each passing day as the huge fleets slowly drew closer in the waters of the Ionian Sea. It was the calm before the storm, when diplomacy had already fallen silent, giving way to the law of force. Two civilizations were preparing for a blow that would determine the future for centuries to come. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. Who do you consider to be the more talented naval commander in this situation? The pirate Barbarossa or the aristocrat Doria? Write about it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on analyses of other great confrontations. What if I told you that defeat was inevitable even before the ships left port? The Holy League of 1538 was perhaps the most ambitious project of Pope Paul III, who sought to halt the expansion of the Ottoman Empire and restore Rome's influence in the Mediterranean. He managed to convince longtime rivals to sit down at the same table for the sake of Europe's survival, which in itself seemed almost impossible. Venice and the Spanish Empire had fought for years over trade routes, colonies, and political prestige, so their alliance was like trying to get people who could barely stand each other to work together. The fleet assembled under the banners of the League seemed like a formidable force capable of changing the course of the war in the region. Hundreds of galleys, heavy galleasses, and galleons stood in the harbor of Corfu, their masts turning the horizon into a dense forest. The Venetians sent the best ships from their arsenal, built by skilled craftsmen and equipped with powerful artillery designed specifically for naval battles. Spain sent its famous tercios and heavy ships, renowned for their durability and ability to withstand the rigors of long voyages. The Papal See and the Order of Malta added select galleys to the fleet, manned by knights who had seen many battles. But beneath this impressive exterior lay deep cracks that only widened over time. Mistrust spread through the fleet faster than any disease, and each new meeting of the command only increased the tension. Andrea Doria, appointed Supreme Commander, made no secret of his skepticism towards Venice and preferred to act cautiously as if playing a complex political game. He delayed setting sail, citing the weather, a lack of supplies, or the need for additional advice, which infuriated the Venetians. Every military council turned into a heated debate, with the admirals' voices rising higher and higher, and arguments often drowning in discontent and irritation. Vincenzo Capello demanded decisive action, assuring everyone that Barbarossa was forced to remain in the bay and could not leave unnoticed. He believed that delay only strengthened the Turks' position. Doria responded coldly and reservedly, arguing that a direct assault on the fortified bay would result in heavy losses. His indecision, which he called caution, gradually penetrated the minds of sailors and officers. Meanwhile, order and confidence reigned in the Ottoman camp, based on iron discipline. Barbarossa, an experienced admiral and former corsair, had a wide network of informants who reported to him on every move of the League. He knew more about the Allies' quarrels than many of the League's fleet commanders, and understood that time was on his side. His captains were trusted men who had fought alongside him in dozens of campaigns and trusted him unconditionally, which gave the Ottomans a psychological advantage. One of the League's key problems was the disparity of its fleet, which consisted of ships of completely different traditions and designs. Heavy sailing ships depended on the wind and could not maneuver quickly, while galleys could easily change course thanks to their oars. This combination required exceptional coordination, which Doria failed to achieve due to constant pressure from politicians and personal interests. He feared losing his own ships, which were the source of his wealth and influence in the European arena. While endless disputes raged in the League camp, Barbarossa did not waste any time. He strengthened his positions in Preveza, adding new artillery batteries on the capes and fortifying the most important sections. He managed to turn the entrance to the bay into a trap, where any large ship became an excellent target for crossfire. Ottoman light ships, manned by experienced sailors, made quick sorties, gathered intelligence, and disrupted communications between League ships. The Venetians increasingly suspected Doria of unwillingness to fight seriously, and rumors of secret negotiations between Charles the Magnificent and the Sultan spread through the fleet like smoke from a wick. People whispered that Spain only wanted to protect its own territories and cared little about the fate of Venice. This atmosphere of intrigue and suspicion undermined trust between the Allies and made any joint decisions almost impossible. On the decks, people watched the Allied ships with anxiety rather than confidence. When the League's fleet finally set sail for Preveza at the end of September, it looked majestic, like a steel river flowing toward the storm. Hundreds of ships moved in formation, showing the world the power of the Christian powers. But within this huge armada, there were many doubts, and every captain knew that unity was based only on fragile agreements. The fleet was going into battle, but its commander seemed more concerned with preserving his reputation and ships than with victory. As the ships approached the site of the future battle, the captains realized that they would have to fight not only the Ottomans. They saw that the lack of a unified strategy made them vulnerable and could lead to disaster. The sailors, though hoping for a miracle, overheard the officers' conversations and felt the growing tension. In their hearts, they dreamed of a glorious victory, but their minds told them that an alliance built on mistrust was always on shaky ground. And yet the fleet pressed on, hoping that the determination of individual commanders would compensate for the mistakes of the overall leadership. The men on the ships believed that experience and courage could change the situation. They recalled previous victories and convinced themselves that even in the most difficult circumstances, a path to success could be found. But shadows of doubt haunted them constantly. Even when the wind filled the sails and the ships cut through the waves together, everyone understood that their forces were divided by internal strife. The Allies could have been invincible if they had managed to act as a single entity, but their disagreements became weapons in the hands of the enemy. While they argued, Barbarossa strengthened his position and prepared to exploit their every weakness. By the time the League approached the fortified Gulf of Preveza, the outcome of the upcoming battle was already largely predetermined. The Christian captains realized that what lay ahead was not just a battle, but a test for which they were ill-prepared due to internal conflicts. However, no one was going to retreat because the shame of retreat seemed worse than any death. They hoped that history would give them a chance to turn the tide. Do you think sworn enemies can work effectively together in the face of mortal danger? In the next chapter, you will learn how geography became a weapon in the hands of an experienced strategist. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us back to ancient times? The place chosen by Barbarossa for the battle was steeped in history. It was here, at Cape Actium, that the fate of Rome was decided a millennium and a half ago. Hayreddin, who knew history well, symbolically positioned his fleet in the same waters where Octavian had once defeated Antony and Cleopatra. The geography of the Gulf of Ambracia was an ideal natural shelter, which the Ottoman admiral turned into an impregnable fortress. The entrance to the bay was narrow and winding, with shoals known only to local pilots. Barbarossa positioned his ships in a crescent shape inside the bay, protecting their flanks with coastal artillery. This prevented the Europeans from using their numerical superiority to surround the Ottoman fleet. Any attempt to break through would mean moving through a narrow corridor under heavy fire from three sides. Andrea Doria was well aware of the danger of a head-on attack on such a position. His plan was to land troops, capture the fortress of Preveza from land, and force Barbarossa's fleet out into the open sea. It was a sensible, classic military move, but its execution required determination and speed. However, the landing was sluggish, and the Ottoman garrison successfully repelled the first infantry attacks. The Venetians insisted on blocking the exit from the bay and starving the Turks. But autumn was setting in, and it was becoming increasingly dangerous to keep a huge fleet in the open sea off hostile shores. Storms could scatter the League's ships, leaving them defenseless and isolated. Barbarossa was aware of this seasonal factor and simply waited for nature to do its work. The situation turned into a tense standoff between two armies separated by a narrow strip of water. Ottoman galleys periodically left the bay, taunting the enemy and provoking them into rash actions. Doria did not succumb to provocation, but he also did not take any active steps, which infuriated his allies. Time was working against the League, supplies were dwindling, and disease was beginning to ravage the crews of the overcrowded ships. Inside the bay, Barbarossa kept morale high, personally visiting the ships and addressing the sailors. He told them that the infidels had brought huge floating castles to their doorstep, which would make excellent firewood for Ottoman baths. His confidence spread to every rower and gunner. The fleet was ready to spring into action like a coiled spring. European admirals saw that the Turks were not going to sit on the defensive forever. The activity of the Ottoman light ships was increasing, and they began to intercept small supply ships of the League. The blockade ring turned out to be full of holes, and the initiative slowly but surely passed to the seemingly trapped enemy. Doria made a fatal mistake when he decided to move the fleet a little further out to sea to avoid a surprise night attack. This gave Barbarossa exactly the room to maneuver he had been waiting for. On the morning of September 28th, the Ottoman fleet began to leave the bay, lining up in battle formation. Seeing this, the Venetians rejoiced, anticipating battle. But Doria hesitated again. The moment of truth was approaching. The geographical trap did not work as the Europeans had expected. Instead of trapping the Turks, it served as a launching pad for their attack. Barbarossa turned the situation upside down, turning his defense into an attack. The walls of the fortress of Preveza and the waters of the bay became silent witnesses to the beginning of the end of Venetian power. The stones that remembered the legionnaires of Rome were now preparing to see the blood of knights and janissaries. Like this, if you enjoy learning about the tactical tricks of the great commanders of the past, want to know a secret that will change your perception of naval battles of that time? We are used to thinking that cannons and sabers decide the outcome of a battle. But in the age of sails and oars, the wind was the main judge. And on the morning of September 28, 1538, the wind decided to play a cruel joke on the Christian fleet, completely depriving it of its main advantage. A complete calm descended on the sea, turning the League's huge sailing galleons into useless wooden islands. The Holy League's fleet consisted of two completely different types of ships. The main striking force was made up of heavy sailing ships, galleons and carracks, with dozens of powerful guns on board. But without wind, they were completely immobile, unable to maneuver, turn for a volley, or come to each other's aid. They froze on the mirror-like surface of the sea, becoming ideal targets. The Ottoman fleet, on the other hand, consisted almost exclusively of galleys. These narrow, predatory vessels were propelled by the power of thousands of rowers' muscles. Calm seas were their natural element. They could move in any direction, quickly change position, attack, and retreat at will. Barbarossa, seeing that the Europeans' sails had slackened, realized that this was a gift from fate. Andrea Doria, who was on his galley, watched the situation with horror. His heavy ships, the main hope for victory in an artillery duel, were scattered and immobilized. He tried to form a battle line, but without wind it was impossible. The League's fleet lost its formation and turned into a chaotic cluster of ships. The Venetian galleys, which could also be rowed, rushed into battle to cover their helpless sailing ships. But Doria gave the order to stay together and not engage in single combat. This order effectively doomed the leading ships to destruction. He feared that if his galleys engaged in battle, they would be cut off from the main force. Barbarossa wasted no time. His galleys, arranged in the shape of a huge wedge or the letter Y, rushed toward the immobile Christian giants. The coordinated rhythm of the drum set the pace for the rowers, and hundreds of oars simultaneously plunged into the water, whipping up the sea. It was like a pack of wolves attacking a herd of buffaloes stuck in a swamp. Their mobility advantage allowed the Turks to choose their angle of attack. They approached from the stern or bow of the sailing ships, where they had the fewest cannons. They fired at them from a safe distance and then closed in for boarding. The immobile galleons could only respond with occasional volleys when the enemy accidentally entered their firing range. The silence of the calm was broken by the roar of cannon fire. The smoke from the shots was not carried away by the wind, and soon the battlefield was enveloped in a thick white mist, in which fiery flashes of lightning flashed. In this smoke, the captains lost visual contact, which further increased the chaos in the ranks of the League. Nature itself seemed to have chosen the winner that day. The technological superiority of the Europeans in the form of heavy sailing ships turned out to be their weakness in the face of the old but proven technology of the rowing fleet. It was a lesson that there are no obsolete weapons in war, only their misuse. The wind never blew, leaving the Christian fleet at the mercy of their enemies. What would you have done in the place of the captain of a sailing ship, seeing the enemy armada approaching and unable to move? In the next chapter, you will learn how the real slaughter began. The Ottoman fleet moved as a single, living organism, controlled by the will of one man. At the center was Hayreddin Barbarossa himself with his best galleys. On the flanks were experienced commanders, Salih Reis and Turgut Reis, future legends of the Ottoman fleet. They surrounded scattered groups of Christian ships, cutting them off from each other and destroying them piece by piece. The first strike fell on the vanguard of the League, where the largest Venetian and Papal ships were located. The Turks used the bee swarm tactic. Dozens of light galleys surrounded one huge galleon, showering it with fire from their bow cannons and a hail of arrows. They circled around the unwieldy giant, preventing it from concentrating its fire on a single target. Ottoman artillerymen fired at the masts and rigging, seeking to immobilize the enemy completely. Falling yards and torn sails covered the decks, preventing the League's gunners from returning fire. As soon as the resistance weakened, boarding hooks flew aboard, and crowds of janissaries rushed to attack. The hand-to-hand combat on the decks was fierce and brief. The janissaries, armed with yataghans and muskets, were renowned for their skill in close combat. European soldiers, encased in armor, often found themselves unable to maneuver in the confined space of the ship's deck. The decks became slippery with blood, and the water around the ships turned crimson. However, not all League ships surrendered without a fight. The heavy artillery of the galleons, when it managed to hit its target, smashed the light Turkish galleys to smithereens. A single successful volley from the ship's battery could destroy several enemy ships at once. But the Turks were willing to pay that price. Their numerical superiority, fanatical determination, allowed them to ignore their losses. Andrea Doria, watching his vanguard being beaten, still did not bring his main forces into battle. He maneuvered at a distance, trying to save his galleys for the decisive moment, which in his opinion had not yet come. This inaction on the part of the commander-in-chief caused despair among those who were dying under Turkish sabers just a couple of miles away from him. The Venetians fought with the fury of the doomed. For them, it was not just a battle, but the defense of their home. Captains blew up their ships rather than surrender them to the enemy, preferring death to captivity. The heroism of individual crews was incredible, but it could not change the overall picture of defeat. Turgut Reis, commander of the Ottoman right flank, showed remarkable tactical flexibility. He got behind the Christian fleet, threatening to surround it. Panic began to spread even among those ships that had not yet entered the battle. The League's formation finally fell apart. The battle turned into a chaotic mess, with each ship fighting for itself. The unified command of the League's fleet ceased to exist. The shouts of the crews, the moans of the wounded, and the roar of explosions merged into a single hum that hung over the water. The sun was setting, illuminating the picture of the complete triumph of Ottoman tactics. Barbarossa methodically destroyed the enemy, enjoying the fruits of his patience and calculation. But amid this chaos, there was one ship that refused to die. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what one ship can do against an entire army? At the center of the battle, a drama unfolded that became legendary in naval history. A huge Venetian galleon commanded by Alessandro Bondumiera found itself cut off from its forces due to calm winds. This floating castle, bristling with cannons, became the main target for the entire Ottoman armada. Seeing easy prey, the Turks attacked it from all sides. Barbarossa personally ordered the capture of this ship to make it a trophy for the Sultan. Dozens of galleys surrounded the galleon like a pack of piranhas attacking a whale. But the whale turned out to have teeth. Bondumiera ordered the cannons to be loaded with grape shot and opened fire. Each volley from the Venetian swept dozens of people off the decks of the Turkish galleys. The sides of the galleon were so high that the Ottomans could not climb aboard. They tried to set the ship on fire, but Bondumiera's disciplined crew instantly extinguished the fires. It was a fortress in the middle of the sea, fighting back with fire and steel. The battle around the galleon lasted several hours. The Turks changed tactics, trying to ram it or fire at it from a distance, but the thick oak planks withstood the blows. Bondumiera's galleon became the center of gravity of the entire battle, drawing significant enemy forces to itself and giving other ships a chance to retreat. At one point, it seemed that the galleon was about to collapse under the onslaught. The sails hung in tatters, the masts were damaged, and most of the crew was wounded. But the Venetian flag continued to fly proudly from the gaff. Bondumier, wounded, continued to command the battle, inspiring his men by his personal example. This heroic defense earned the respect of even their enemies. Ottoman chroniclers later described the ship as devilish, claiming that it was protected by evil spirits. In reality, it was protected by the courage and professionalism of the Venetian sailors, who knew that no help was coming. While Bondumier fought, Andrea Doria's main forces remained inactive. Many captains watched their comrades' lonely battle with pain, but the admiral's orders forbade them to intervene. This betrayal, committed through inaction, became a black mark on Doria's reputation. By evening, when it was getting dark, the Turks, having suffered huge losses, retreated from the battered galleon. Bondumier survived. His ship, riddled with cannonballs and resembling a colander, remained afloat. It was a miracle that was hard to believe, but it really happened. The story of Bondumier's galleon is an example of how, even in a hopeless situation, the steadfastness of a single unit can become a symbol of resistance for all. He did not win the battle, but he saved the honor of the Christian fleet that day. Do you think Doria's caution was justified, or should he have risked the entire fleet to save one ship, albeit a heroic one? In the next chapter, we will examine the anatomy of betrayal. Andrea Doria's behavior at the Battle of Preveza is still hotly debated by historians. Why did the most experienced admiral with the most powerful fleet at his disposal effectively allow the enemy to destroy his allies with impunity? The answer lies not in military tactics, but in high politics and personal interests. Doria was not just an admiral, he was a condottiere in the service of the emperor, but above all, he remained a Genoese. Genoa and Venice were old trading rivals. Cynically speaking, the destruction of the Venetian fleet by the Turks was beneficial to Genoa. The weakening of its rival opened up new opportunities for Genoese trade. In addition, the ships commanded by Doria belonged to him personally and were leased to the emperor. The loss of these ships would mean enormous financial losses for him. He guarded his property like a thrifty owner, forgetting that the fate of the Christian world was at stake. His caution bordered on cowardice, but it was dictated by cold calculation. There were also secret instructions from Emperor Charles V. The emperor did not want the Ottomans to be completely defeated, as this would strengthen Venice. He needed a balance of power in which both maritime powers would depend on Spain. Doria, a loyal servant of his master, brilliantly played the game of neither peace nor war, preserving the fleet but losing the battle. The Venetians, seeing Doria's maneuvers, openly called him a traitor. Admiral Capello begged, threatened, and demanded an attack, but Doria remained deaf to his pleas. He moved his ships further and further away from the epicenter of the battle, leaving his allies to die. This cold detachment against the backdrop of a raging battle looked monstrous. When the wind finally picked up a little towards evening, Doria had a chance to launch a counterattack. The Ottoman galleys were exhausted from the battle, their ammunition running low. The fresh forces of the Spanish fleet could have turned the tide of the battle, but Doria again gave the order to retreat, finally bearing any hopes of victory. This act permanently damaged relations between the allies. The Holy League, created with such difficulty, collapsed right on the battlefield. Trust was destroyed, and each member of the alliance understood that in politics there are no friends, only temporary allies. Doria's actions at Preveza became a textbook example of how personal and corporate interests can prevail over the common cause. It was a victory of selfishness over duty. At the moment of the battle, few understood the full depth of this political game. The sailors saw only that their admiral was leading the ships away from the enemy. A feeling of shame and helplessness overwhelmed the crews of the Spanish ships, who were eager to fight but were forced to obey orders. The silence of Doria's cannon sounded louder than Barbarossa's cannonade. It was a silence that marked the end of the era of chivalry and the beginning of the era of pragmatic realpolitik. By the evening of September 28th, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The sea around Preveza had turned into a huge mass grave, where the bodies of the dead swayed among the wreckage of masts and overturned boats. The sunlight was fading, but the fiery glare of burning ships made the picture even gloomier. The Ottoman sailors continued to advance, acting in a collected and confident manner as they had at the beginning of the battle. Despite their fatigue, the light galleys of the Turks persistently pursued their lagging enemies, Like predators who sense the weakness of their prey. Barbarossa sought to deliver the final blow and deprive the League of the opportunity to quickly regain its strength. The captured Venetian and Papal galleys were carefully towed away to be displayed later in the port as proof of victory. The Ottoman sailors worked quickly, trying to prevent the captives from attempting to escape or sabotage. The prisoners faced the most severe trials, as slave labor on galleys was considered one of the most painful forms of punishment. Some of the captives already knew that their days of freedom were over, and looked at their burning ships as if saying goodbye to their past lives. The cries of the captured Christians mingled with the joyful shouts of the victors, who praised their admiral for his decisiveness. A murmur of human voices hung over the sea, gradually dissolving into the approaching twilight. The League's losses were catastrophic, and their true scale only became clear as night fell. Swept away by Ottoman volleys, the galleys sank one after another, carrying their crews into the cold depths. Some ships surrendered without a fight, realizing that resistance was futile. Others continued to fight to the last, trying at least to slow the enemy's advance. But the heaviest blow was not only the loss of ships, but the collapse of the image of Europe's invincible naval power. One day had undone decades of effort, and all the Allies knew that this defeat would be remembered for a long time. The Ottoman losses, on the contrary, were surprisingly small, which caused sincere shock among Christians. The light and fast Turkish galleys skillfully evaded the fire of heavy cannons, as if anticipating each volley. This was facilitated by experienced crews accustomed to fighting in the difficult conditions of the Eastern Mediterranean. Barbarossa used the smoke from burning ships as additional protection, concealing his maneuvers. In the confusion of battle, many Christian artillerymen were unable to aim their cannons accurately, which played into the hands of the Turks. Thus, the Ottoman admiral kept most of his fleet virtually intact. When night fell completely on the sea, it hid all the horrors of the past day, but it could not muffle the moans of the wounded. The burning hulls of the ships continued to illuminate the water for a long time, turning the surface of the sea into an ominous living fire. The flames were reflected in the cold waves, creating the feeling that the whole world around was engulfed in war. The flames devoured the masts and decks, and the crackling of the collapsing wood could be heard even on distant ships. This spectacle became a veritable funeral ceremony for the lost hopes of Venice and its allies. The night brought no peace to any of the survivors of the battle. Panic reigned in the Allied camp, and no orders from the officers could restore order. Ships wandered in the darkness, bumping into each other and losing their direction. Some vessels ran aground, trying to escape the zone of possible pursuit, but only worsened their situation. Sailors who had lost contact with their flagships acted at random and thought only of salvation, not of continuing the battle. Everyone understood that a counterattack was impossible and that any delay could cost lives. The retreat finally turned into a chaotic flight. For Venice, that evening marked the beginning of a long period of mourning, as the Republic had lost a significant part of its fleet. It was not just a military defeat, but a blow to the centuries-old maritime tradition of a state that lived by trade. The Venetians were proud of their ships and their ability to dominate the sea lanes, but now they had to face the reality of complete defeat. It was especially hard to realize that their allies had failed to live up to expectations and show unity at the crucial moment. The Venetian commanders understood that trust had been destroyed and would be extremely difficult to restore. The pain of loss was mixed with a bitter feeling of betrayal. Barbarossa, meanwhile, celebrated a triumph that would go down in history as one of his greatest achievements. He had managed to prove that the Ottoman Empire was capable not only of defending itself, but also of confidently dominating the seas. His name now commanded respect and fear even among the most experienced European sailors. The admiral understood that this victory would strengthen his position at the Sultan's court and give him even more power. His officers congratulated him, confident that they had become part of an event that would change the balance of power in the region. For Barbarossa, it was a night when his legend became even brighter. The sunset of that day became a symbol of the decline of the former Christian domination of the Mediterranean, which had been considered unchallenged for more than a century. Now the balance of power had shifted, and the Ottoman Empire had shown that it could dictate its own terms. The crescent moon rising above the horizon seemed to emphasize what was happening, eclipsing the cross. Many European captains understood that difficult years of struggle lay ahead, in which they would have to rethink their strategies. The Battle of Preveza was a lesson that Europe could not ignore. It showed that the old methods of naval warfare no longer worked. The water gradually calmed down, absorbing the traces of destruction and taking the bodies of the dead into its depths. It seemed that the sea was striving to regain its former calm, but the political consequences of the battle were only gaining momentum. The loss of so many lives and such significant forces marked the beginning of new diplomatic conflicts that would affect many powers. The Ottoman victory changed trade routes, forcing Europeans to seek new alliances and strengthen their fleets. The waves of this battle would continue to spread throughout the Mediterranean for a long time to come. The world could no longer return to its former equilibrium. It seemed that the misfortunes of the Christian fleet had ended with the onset of night, but nature had its own plans. Immediately after the ignominious retreat, Andrea Doria ordered the stern lights to be extinguished in order to hide from possible pursuit. The huge fleet moved in complete darkness, by touch, which was a dangerous maneuver in itself. And then a real storm broke out. The wind, which had been so lacking during the day, blew with furious force at night, tearing sails and breaking masts. The ships, wounded in battle, many of which were barely afloat, could not resist the elements. What Barbarossa's cannons had not finished, the waves completed. Venetian and Spanish ships, having lost control, crashed against the rocks of the Greek islands. The crews, exhausted by the battle, had no strength left to fight the storm. Many galleys simply capsized and sank with all hands. It was like divine punishment for cowardice and discord. Doria, an experienced sailor, managed to preserve the core of his fleet, but the losses among the damaged ships were catastrophic. The retreat turned into a tragedy of epic proportions. The Ottoman fleet, sheltered in the Bay of Preveza, safely weathered the storm. For Barbarossa, this storm was further confirmation that the heavens were on his side. The next morning, the shores were littered with the wreckage of Christian ships, which the waves had washed up at the feet of the victors. News of the disaster reached Europe faster than the remnants of the fleet could return. Shock reigned in Venice, Rome, and Madrid. No one could believe that such a powerful armada had been lost so ingloriously. The search for those responsible began, and all fingers pointed to Doria. Emperor Charles V received his admiral coldly, but did not punish him. After all, Doria had fulfilled his main, albeit unspoken task. He had saved the Spanish ships. The loss of the Venetians was acceptable collateral damage. For the ordinary sailors who survived this hell, the return home was joyless. They felt not like heroes, but like victims of someone else's ambitions. Their stories of betrayal by the command quickly spread through the port taverns of Europe. The storm scattered not only the ships, but also the remnants of the Holy League's unity. The alliance officially ceased to exist shortly after the battle. Everyone was now on their own in the face of the triumphant East. Preveza became a lesson that war does not end after the last shot is fired. Sometimes retreat is more terrible than battle itself. The consequences of the Battle of Preveza were global. Barbarossa's victory effectively turned the Mediterranean Sea into an Ottoman lake. For the next 33 years, until the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, the Turks ruled the seas unchallenged. Venice, left alone, was forced to make a humiliating peace with the Sultan. In 1540, a treaty was signed under which the Republic ceded its last fortresses in the Morea and the Aegean Islands to the Ottomans, and paid a colossal indemnity of 300,000 gold ducats. It was a blow from which Venice never fully recovered. The European economy was shaken. Trade routes to the east were now completely controlled by Istanbul. Prices for spices and silk skyrocketed, spurring the search for alternative routes to India and ultimately accelerating the age of discovery. The Portuguese and Spanish turned their attention to the ocean, realizing that the Mediterranean Sea was closed to them. Hayreddin Barbarossa became a national hero of the Ottoman Empire. He lived out the rest of his days in honor and glory, building mosques and palaces. His tomb in Istanbul is still a place of worship for Turkish sailors, who salute it as they pass by on their ships. For Andrea Doria, Preveza remained a stain on his reputation, although he continued to serve the emperor. His name became synonymous with prudence bordering on treason. Historians still argue whether he was an evil genius or a pragmatic politician who saved Spain from unnecessary losses. The Battle of Preveza showed that even the most sophisticated weapons are useless without unity and the will to win. It demonstrated the superiority of unified command over coalition chaos. It was a triumph of strategy and psychology over brute force and numbers. Europe learned this cruel lesson. It took a whole generation for the fear of the Turkish fleet to give way to a new determination. But the shadows of those who died at Preveza long reminded monarchs of the price of discord. The world had changed. The center of gravity of world politics began to shift from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. But that is a different story altogether. Preveza is remembered as the moment when the Crescent shone brightest, eclipsing the sun of old Europe. The story of the Battle of Preveza is not just a chronicle of a military clash, it is a mirror of human vices and virtues. We saw the genius of Barbarossa, the cowardice and calculation of Doria, and the heroism of Bondumier. We learned how wind and geography can become participants in battle on a par with people. And most importantly, we understood that the most crushing defeats are inflicted not by enemies, but by friends. The Ottoman Empire gained the key to the sea, and Europe learned a bitter lesson about the need for unity. This lesson is still relevant today. Alliances sealed only on paper burn as quickly as sails under fire. What detail of this grand drama struck you the most? Barbarossa's cunning, Doria's betrayal, or the steadfastness of a lone galleon? Suggest topics you would like to see in future videos in the comments, such as the Great Siege of Malta or the Battle of Lepanto. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can join us in uncovering forgotten pages of history.